Hello, thank you for tuning into my channel. It's Vlogmas in July 2021, day 6, which makes it a t-shirt quilt Tuesday. So if you want to see how to go from these t-shirt panels to these t-shirt panels, please stay tuned. So it's time to start the process of making a t-shirt quilt. I've made several of these before. I made my older two sons, they have quilts with their rec jerseys. I've also been commissioned to make a few quilts, and that's been fun. And so today, this is kind of a quilt. I wouldn't say it's for myself, but I haven't been commissioned to make it. I just had some shirts that I want to put into a quilt. I have the shirts here. These are all shirts from the school where I work. I typically buy a lot of, for example, a lot of field day shirts, and so I had a lot of shirts left over, and I wanted to pull from these, from what I have, to make a quilt. The design of this quilt, I took a picture of all of the shirts laid out together, and I think that may be the layout that I use. I'll play around with it a little bit, but I'm going to put a picture of the shirts here laid out on the floor so that you can kind of see all the different colors and stuff that I'm going to be working with. I have a few little designs for this idea that I have. Oh, this is a really good one. Because it actually shows the number of quilts that of blocks that I'm going to have. I have 12 shirts, and I want to set them 3 across by 4 down. Hopefully you can see that here. And then I'm going to sash in between the blocks. And this drawing shows sashing around the blocks, but I think I'm just going to do a decent sized border. I don't think I'll do the sashing on the edge. But this is a basic block layout. There are lots of different ways that people play around with the designs on t-shirts, but I think I'm just going to do this one as simple as I can, just to make the process easy for me and for me to explain it to you. Okay, so today we're just going to do one small step. Today I'm just going to prepare the shirts for the quilt, and then next time we'll add another step and another step until the entire top is done. So the first thing that I've done to prepare these shirts is I've actually cut the front from the back. And so here is one of them, and I brought over the part that I cut it away from. So all I did was cut up the sides, and then I cut the front of the sleeve and then over across the shoulder. And so this is a pretty big piece of shirt that's left over. And so I have 12 of these. I have no idea what I'm going to do with them, but it already seems interesting to think about. So all of that's done. And now my next step is going to be to measure these shirts, or to measure the designs. But first, let's go over everything that I'm going to need for today. I forgot to go over that step. So of course I have my the fronts of my shirts. I'm also going to be using some interfacing to stabilize. These shirts are like, they have a lot of stretch in them because they're polyester cotton blend or whatever. And so in order to make them easier for me to sew, I'm going to put some stabilizer on the back. This is the Pelon SK135 sheer knit fusible interfacing. And so this is what I'm going to be using for to stabilize the shirts. I like this because it gives some stability and makes it easier to sew, but it doesn't, it's not too rigid. So you can still, the quilt will still stay kind of soft as I make it. I also am going to be using my ruler. I think I'm going to use my 22-inch ruler just to do a little bit of cutting, but it depends on the final size, because I do have a 15-inch ruler, so if I can get it out of the smaller ruler, I will. I have my rotary cutter. I have my big mat. I'm also going to use my iron and my ironing board today to attach the or to fuse the interfacing onto the shirts. Okay, so first let's get ready to do some measuring. I went ahead and pulled my 15-inch square ruler out because the first step of this is going to be to measure basically just this design to see what the smallest design is. Actually, no, that's not true. It's to see what the biggest design is. I've already determined that I'm going to make all of these blocks the same size, so I need to see which of these blocks is the biggest or which of the designs is the biggest, so I know what measurement to cut all of my designs from. And then the reason that I'm doing this first is because I want to cut the squares out of the interfacing, then attach them, then cut everything out. So I'll do this on camera, but I will speed up the video so that you can see me measuring the blocks. In my sewing book, I've written out the color of each shirt so I know how big the design is. It doesn't matter other than I just need to know which one is the biggest so I know how to cut all of these designs out. So I'm going to move the camera and then I'll speed it up when I am measuring the blocks, but hopefully I can show you in the video the measurements of each block just so you can have an idea how I'm figuring out this process. I've measured all of my shirts, and the largest design size that I got was 14 inches. I listed the rectangular measurements, but of course out of these shirts I'm going to be cutting squares. My next step is going to be to take this interfacing and I'm going to cut 12 squares out of it. I've decided that I'm going to start with a block size of 15 inches. So hopefully out of each of the shirts, and I went ahead and measured the smallest shirt just to be sure I'd be able to get that 15 inches out. I'm going to attach 15-inch squares to the backs of those shirts. So I'm going to cut the squares out here. I think I'm going to try to do this on camera. This interfacing is not very thick, so what I'm hoping I can do is get just do like 3 sets of cuts. So do like fold it over so that there are 4 pieces in each cut that I make. And this interfacing, it is 20 inches by 15 yards. So there should be plenty of interfacing here for me to get my 12 blocks. I usually buy this on the bolt, so I like to get it already wrapped in the plastic so I know that it's a full 15 yards. But sometimes in the store, if it's not on the bolt, even if you think if it's not wrapped in the plastic, if you think it's 15 yards, they will measure it to be sure. And I've seen that too, where they pull it all off and measure it. And one time it was actually the whole 15 yards. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. This is really simple. It does have this paper back on it, and I actually take this paper and use it for foundation piecing. But since I have a plastic bag full of the paper, I'm not going to use it off of this roll. Well, I don't think I am. So let me get ready to cut this so that you can see it. Again, I'm cutting 12 15-inch squares. it's time to add the interfacing squares to the backs of my t-shirts. I have already done a practice one here. This was supposed to be the first one on camera, but I forgot to push record. This is what it's going to look like. This is the front of the shirt, and then this is the back with that 15-inch square panel on it. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do for each one of these shirts. I have the shirts here on this chair. What I've already done is gone through and given each one of them a quick press to get the deep wrinkles out. And so hopefully I can put the interfacing on the shirts fairly easily. I think I'm going to put this one under here. There's a little shelf there for all my finished ones. I think I'll do that. So I'm going to try to follow the instructions on the interfacing. The reason I'm going to do that is because I think that I've already killed an iron from doing a lot of interfacing for my bears. And this is a new ironing board, and it already has a little bit of residue on it from where I've tried interfacing the way that I wanted to instead of following the directions. So I'm going to try to follow the directions for this. I'll do one on camera live, and then I'll speed up the video so that you can see the rest of the process. Be sure that when you are working with your interfacing that you follow the directions. Each one is a little bit different. I'm going to tell you what it says for the Pelon SK135 that I'm using. Okay, so what it says is that first you need to pin everything in place. I am not going to pin. I know I said I was going to follow the directions, but I'm not going to pin. I'm just going to lay it there, because that is like for if you have like a apparel pattern that you're sewing. So I'm not gonna pin. I have the t-shirt face down on my iron, so the front of the shirt is face down, and then I'm gonna put this interfacing down with the bumps. One side feels bumpy, one side feels smooth. So I'm gonna put the bumpy side towards the fabric. And I am just kind of eyeballing this. It doesn't have to be perfect. I am going to cut this down after it's after I get them all done. I'm cutting them down to their right size, so it's not super important. Okay, so now that I have it laid down, the directions say to steam base this around the edges. So I'm just going to go around the edges with a light iron. I have my iron set on blend. And I think that's kind of the same as permanent press. The directions say permanent press, but I don't have that on my iron. So I'm just going to go down the sides. Just put a little steam in there. Well, it's supposed to be steaming, but I don't hear anything. And that's okay. It'll come back in a minute. But I'm just pressing down the edges with my iron. And going around all four sides. Of course, if you have a pattern piece, if there's some apparel that you're making, this will look a little bit different. But this is really simple because it's a big square. Okay. And I would check it, but I'm not going to check it. I think it's going to be okay. And I've never done this before, and I think it's really going to help. You know, that's what happens when you follow the directions. Okay, now it says to take a damp pressing cloth, and I just found a fat quarter in my bureau, and I'm going to use it because it's going to fit the approximate size of the square without me having to pick it up and move it. And then I'm going to just use a gliding motion and go down the width of the strip, or the width of the interfacing. Okay, that was the first one. And each time I'm moving over a little bit just to get a little bit more of the square. And I think the ends are basted down, so now it's just basting or just attaching or fusing the center. Okay, and then one more pass. And I have a little basin of water over on my sewing table, and when I feel like this cloth gets too dry, I'm going to dip it in that water and wring it out real good. Okay, and I'm just going over this a second time. I don't think it needs it, but I'm just doing it. Okay. So there we go. And now it should be good infused. There's one little funky part. So I'm just gonna hopefully fix that now. Still a little funky. Okay. And it could be that my cloth is too dry, because the rest of it seems to have fused nicely. Okay. All right, so I think it's all fused. I'm gonna lift it up. I'm putting my cloth back in my basin so that it can get wet again. All right, so here we go. Here's the front. I'm not sure if you can see this on the camera because it's so light, but there's the back. And it seems to have fused okay. So for the rest of this, I'll do it on camera, but I will speed up the video just so that you can see the process. And if I don't get all of them done on camera, that's okay. Actually, I changed my mind. I'm gonna do all of these off camera now that you've seen the process, and I will come back when it's time to cut everything down. I have all of my panels here behind me with the interfacing on, and surprise, when you follow the directions, the interfacing actually sticks for the most part. As far as I can tell, everything is sticking well. I want to go ahead and cut one of these shirts on camera so that you can see it, and then I'll cut the rest of them and I'll meet you back downstairs. Let me zoom in a little bit on this camera to show you what I'm doing. So to cut this panel, I'm using my 22.5-inch ruler. I'm going to start by lining it up with the 15-inch line at the end down here. Okay, and then I'm going to try and line up with 15 at the bottom. It doesn't matter if these panels are perfect, because when I cut the square will hopefully be perfect. Alright, so I'm just kind of adjusting a little bit. And actually I'm going to play because the it doesn't seem to be lining up the way I want it to. And that's okay. As long as I have the 1/4 inch within the seam allowance, or the interfacing within the seam allowance, it's fine. Oh, I lost my rotary cutter. Alright, so here we go. I'm going to cut two sides here. Here's the first side, and I'll move around to cut the second side. Okay, and then when I flip I'm going to flip this around and I'll line up the 15 inches where I just cut. So here we go. Just lining up the right side and the bottom now with the sides that I just cut. So 15, and then I'm going to scoop this one down a little bit to get the 15. And then just lining it up. These are the finished panels for my t-shirt quilt. I am really happy with the way they turned out. I feel bad a little bit because I've been saving this project and just setting it aside, but now that it's done, it's really not bad. When you make a t-shirt quilt, or when I make a t-shirt quilt, this part is the most challenging, getting the shirts prepared, cutting everything apart, putting that interfacing on. After this, the sewing is going to be pretty simple. I am probably going to play with this layout a little bit. I want to think about putting all the blues, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the 4 corners, and then mixing everything else in with that. So that's something I'm going to think about before I add the sashing. And then I'm going to add some cornerstones and put this whole thing together. So for the next t-shirt quilt video, I'm going to be putting the sashing in between and the cornerstones, and maybe sewing the whole thing together. We'll see. If you have any questions about what you've seen in this video, leave them in the comments below. Thumbs up this video and share it with your friends. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!